Hi folks, Seth here. Thanks for watching my monologue. In these uncertain times, you may be thinking about personal protection. If you are, I urge you to visit my friends at Guns Etc. They'll help you find the perfect protection for yourself and your family, and they can even teach you how to use it. They've been protecting Arizonans for over 33 years, and they stand for the great principles this country was founded upon. Or you can just click on gunsetcetera.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back, and happy November 11th, 2020. There's a lot going on in the news, and we'll get to it shortly, but you know me, I distrust the frenzy and crisis imposed on us by partisans and news media alike. I think they are distractions. I think they are used to cause further distractions, and I think they are ginned up for profit and political suasion, if not propaganda. The Roman poet Virgil put it, "Here too things mortal touch the soul." I like to think they still do. So if you'll allow me, because but for the exertions of better men than myself, we wouldn't even be able to have the luxury of the frenzies and crises we do have, or be able to criticize them. Happy Veterans Day. Now, we say happy because it's not Memorial Day. It is more of a day of honor and valor, not of death, but of life, certainly not in celebration of war. Armistice Day is what this was once called, after all, but an ending of wars for good or great or just or noble ends, and we thus honor all men and women in uniform, those still with us and those who've passed on. And so we honor great men and women who have kept us and so many others free, and freed so many who have been captured by other men and women, or by horrible ideologies weaponized by the arms of other men and women. Mostly, I take it, though, it's a day to commemorate and celebrate great Americans who achieved great things. There are so many stories, and I want yours. If you were a soldier, if you are a soldier in any of the armed services or have a good story about one, this is your day, and your day to call in and share it with us. Please do. One of my regrets in life is that I did not press my dad for more of his stories. He didn't talk about them much, and so I suppose I was respecting that as a child. In retrospect, I wished I respected history just a little more and pressed him for some more stories. But my dad, Eugene Leibson, was a World War II veteran. He fought in the Pacific Theater, including in the Battle of Okinawa. It lasted nearly 3 months, and over 18,000 Americans were killed in those 3 months, 13,000 of them in action. Contemplate that for a moment, the kinds of wars and battles we wrung our hands over then and now. One battle, more than 10,000 men died. 3 months. My dad then went on to occupy Hiroshima 2 months after we dropped the bomb there. He would have been likely killed in the invasion force that was our other option without the bomb. Thank God for Truman. I still wonder if Hollywood actors who didn't think Ellen DeGeneres should have met with George W. Bush because they called him a warmonger and war criminal, if she could have met with FDR or Harry Truman, were she alive in the 1940s and 1950s. Dad then came home as a sergeant from the Army Air Corps, went to college on the GI Bill, then to medical school, and raised his family here. Obviously, he's my favorite veteran, as he is my favorite American and man. Again, I'd love to hear about yours. But there is no shortage of amazing stories from every war we've been in. I always tell the story of Guy Gabaldon. I tell it every year. He passed away 14 years ago. I love his story. Here's how we have it in the American Patriots Almanac. On his first night on the island of Saipan in June 1944, Marine Private Guy Gabaldon slipped out of camp on his own and returned with 2 Japanese prisoners. His commanders told him that if he left his post again, he'd be court-martialed. But the next night, he disappeared again and came back with 50 prisoners. After that, his superiors let him go on his lone wolf missions whenever he wanted. Gabaldon wasn't simply after prisoners. He was trying to save lives. American troops had stormed Saipan and the Mariana Islands to break the Japanese defense line in the Pacific and to secure a site for an airbase. The Japanese tried to hold the island with desperate suicide charges. Gabaldon figured that more prisoners meant fewer casualties. Just 18 years old, Guy Gabaldon had learned street smarts from growing up in the East Los Angeles barrios. He also knew some Japanese thanks to a childhood friendship with a Japanese-American family. His strategy was simple. Working alone, he would creep up to an enemy-held cave or bunker, call out that the Marines were nearby, and assure the Japanese that they would be tolerated with dignity if they would lay down their arms. I must have seen too many John Wayne movies, because what I was doing was suicidal, Gabaldon later said. But his plan kept working. One day, Gabaldon persuaded some 800 Japanese soldiers to surrender and follow him back to American lines. His astounded comrades nicknamed him the Pied Piper of Saipan. Before being wounded by machine gun fire, he captured some 1,500 prisoners. Gabaldon's bravery earned him the Navy Cross, and Hollywood made a movie, Hell to Eternity, about him. But his greatest reward was knowing that in the midst of a bloody Pacific battle, he had single-handedly saved many American lives. There's untold numbers of these stories. For where do we find these men? We find them in America. They rose up to defend America, be it on this plot of land or elsewhere, which is why we find them here. I hope to do a lot of tributes to veterans today because they and we Americans deserve it. They earned it, and we must aspire to keep earning it. You've heard me lament the downgraded state of patriotism here. You can thank the cultural and academic left for that. Me? I'll stick with the leaven which binds together the entire fabric of our country, to borrow the words of Douglas MacArthur. And all who are privileged to live here and all who are privileged to come here, we can rest well knowing, whatever they may think, that they are the product of that leavening, too. I think I should like to close with the man who, more than any other, captured the soul of America, Ronald Reagan. In his 1985 Veterans Day address at Arlington Cemetery, he said this: "The living have a responsibility to remember the conditions that led to the wars in which our heroes died. Perhaps we can start by remembering this, that all of those who died for us and our country were, in one way or another, victims of a peace process that failed. Victims of a decision to forget certain things. To forget, for instance, that the surest way to keep a peace going is to stay strong. Weakness, after all, is a temptation. It tempts the pugnacious to assert themselves. But strength is a declaration that cannot be misunderstood. Strength is a condition that declares actions have consequences. Strength is a prudent warning to the belligerent that aggression need not go unanswered. Peace fails when we forget what we stand for. It fails when we forget that our republic is based on firm principles, principles that have real meaning, that with them we are the last best hope of man on earth, and without them we're little more than simply the crust of a continent. Peace also fails when we forget to bring to the bargaining table God's first intellectual gift to man, common sense. Common sense gives us a realistic knowledge of human beings and how they think, how they live in the world, what motivates them. Common sense tells us that man has magic in him, but also clay. Common sense can tell the difference between right and wrong. Common sense forgives error, but it always recognizes it to be error first. We endanger the peace and confuse all issues when we obscure the truth. When we refuse to name an act for what it is, when we refuse to see the obvious and seek safety in Almighty. Peace is only maintained and won by those who have clear eyes and brave minds. Peace is imperiled when we forget to try for agreements and settlements and treaties, when we forget to hold out our hands and strive, when we forget that God gave us talents to use in securing the ends He desires. Peace fails when we forget that agreements, once made, cannot be broken without a price. Each new day carries within it the potential for breakthroughs, for progress. Each new day bursts with possibilities. And so, hope is realistic, and despair a pointless little sin. And peace fails when we forget to pray to the source of all peace and life and happiness. I think sometimes of General Matthew Ridgway, who, the night before D-Day, tossed sleepless on his cot and talked to the Lord and listened for the promise that God made to Joshua, "I will not fail thee nor forsake thee." We're surrounded today by the dead of our wars. We owe them a debt we can never repay. All we can do is remember them and what they did and why they had to be brave for us. All we can do is try to see that other young men never have to join them. Today as never before, we must pledge to remember the things that will continue peace. Today as never before, we must pray for God's help in broadening and deepening the peace we enjoy. Let us pray for freedom and justice and a more stable world, and let us make a compact today with the dead, a promise in the words for which General Ridgway listened. "I will not fail thee nor forsake thee." In memory of those who gave the last full measure of devotion, may our efforts to achieve lasting peace gain strength. Through whatever coincidence or accident of timing, I tell you that a week from now, when I am thousands of miles away, believe me, the memory and the importance of this day will be in the forefront of in my mind and in my heart. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. Thank you, veterans. God bless you and the cause you served and serve. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.